He was about to lose everything, and he did not even know it would begin with two freezing children on a broken park bench. Adrian Vale had built his empire from nothing, turning ruthless ambition into a billion-dollar corporation his name carried. Power his decisions moved markets, and his cold personality was legendary in boardrooms. People feared disappointing him more than they feared failure itself, but on that winter night as snow swallowed the city in silence, fate was quietly waiting. Under a flickering streetlight, Adrian had just left a tense shareholders' dinner where he defended layoffs that would cost hundreds of employees their jobs. He told himself it was necessary. Growth required sacrifice. Emotions were weaknesses. And weakness destroyed leaders. His driver had the night off, so he chose to walk the last few blocks to clear his head. The air was sharp enough to sting his lungs, and the streets were nearly empty except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. Then he heard something soft, almost carried away by the wind, a cough fragile and desperate. He slowed down, irritated at first, but the sound came again, and this time he turned his head toward the old park he usually ignored there beneath. A dying lamp sat two children pressed tightly together, a boy thin and alert, and a little girl trembling so violently it looked painful. Their clothes were worn and soaked through their shoes. Too small for the weather, Adrian stopped only for a second, telling himself it was not his responsibility. Cities were full of sad stories, and if he let every one of them touch him, he would never survive. But then the boy looked up, and their eyes met. There was no begging in that look, only exhaustion. And something worse, acceptance, as if the world had already taught him no one was coming. Adrian felt an unfamiliar pressure in his chest. He stepped closer, asking where their parents were. The boy hesitated before answering. "They are gone," the girl whispered. "We just need somewhere warm tonight, mister." "Please." Adrian checked his watch, as if time could protect him from the decision forming inside his mind. He offered money, but the boy shook his head. "Money will not stop the cold." Adrian felt irritation rise. He was not equipped for this. He handled mergers, hostile takeovers, international negotiations, not children on benches yet. The snow kept falling heavier now, covering their shoulders like a quiet warning, and suddenly the girl swayed dangerously. The boy grabbed her, terrified, and something inside Adrian cracked. He removed his coat without thinking and wrapped it around her small, shaking frame. Her fingers clutched the fabric as if it were life itself. He made the decision, then the kind of decision that cannot be undone. "Get in the car," he said, pointing to his black sedan parked nearby. The boy hesitated, protective and suspicious, but the girl could barely stand, so he helped her into the back seat. The warmth inside the vehicle fogged the windows, and for the first time, Adrian noticed how fragile they truly looked. He drove toward his penthouse, telling himself it was temporary. Just one night, an act of controlled charity, nothing more, but deep down he felt the shift already beginning. As if the foundation of his carefully constructed world had developed a crack, they arrived at the towering glass building where he lived above the city. Like a king removed from ordinary suffering, his staff stared in shock as he entered with two half-frozen children wrapped in designer fabric. Adrian ordered hot baths, food, clean clothes, and medical attention. His voice firm, but his thoughts chaotic. While the children ate silently at the massive dining table, he studied them. The boy introduced himself as Noah and the girl as Lily. Their mother had died months ago. Illness and unpaid hospital bills had taken everything. Their father disappeared shortly after, leaving deaths and dangerous people behind. Shelters were overcrowded, and eventually they were forced onto the streets. Adrian listened without interrupting, something tightening in his throat that he refused to name. Later that night, after they fell asleep in the guest rooms, he stood alone by the window, overlooking the glowing skyline, telling himself this would not go further. But across the street, hidden behind tinted glass, a freelance journalist had photographed the powerful CEO entering his building with two unknown children, and by morning those images would explode across social media, igniting questions, accusations, and speculation that would threaten his company, his reputation, and the control he valued above all else. Adrian had no idea that his simple decision in the snow was about to become the most dangerous risk of his life, and as he finally tried to rest, he could not ignore the strange truth forming inside him for the first time in years. He did not feel powerful, he felt responsible. By sunrise, the world knew, and it was ready to destroy him. Adrian woke to the relentless vibration of his phone, dozens of missed calls, hundreds of notifications, and a headline spreading like wildfire. Mysterious CEO brings homeless children in too. His luxury penthouse speculation turned vicious within hours, accusing him of publicity stunts, exploitation, even darker motives. Investors panicked, stocks dipped, and board members demanded immediate explanations while inside the quiet guest wing, Noah was already awake, standing near the window, watching the unfamiliar skyline as if preparing himself to run again. Lily still slept, curled under a soft blanket, the first warmth she had felt in months. Adrian entered the kitchen to find his chief operations officer on video call, furious, warning him that the board was calling an emergency session. Some directors insisted the children must be removed immediately to avoid reputational damage. Adrian felt anger rise, not at the media, not at the numbers falling on his stock app, but at the cold calculation in their voices, as if two children were simply liabilities to be managed. He ended the call abruptly and walked toward the guest wing, where he saw something that stopped him cold. Noah was carefully folding the new clothes provided and packing them back into the bag. They had arrived with his movements, quiet, practiced, and heartbreakingly efficient. Adrian asked what he was doing, and the boy replied, "We do not want to cause trouble. We can leave before anyone gets angry again." Those words hit harder than any financial threat because they revealed a truth. Adrian had never considered these children, expected abandonment as routine. They had already learned that kindness was temporary and safety was fragile. Adrian knelt down, something he had not done for anyone in years, and told Noah, "You are not the problem. I made this choice, and I do not regret it." Noah searched his face for doubt, but found none. Meanwhile, the board meeting began without him. Several directors voted to temporarily suspend him, citing reckless personal behavior. News channels debated his sanity. Analysts predicted collapse. Competitors quietly celebrated, yet something unexpected started happening. Employees across his company began posting their own stories of childhood struggle, of sleeping in cars, of losing parents, of surviving on strangers' kindness. The narrative slowly shifted from scandal to humanity. Customers flooded the company page with support, praising the act of compassion and demanding leadership with heart. Adrian realized that for the first time, the world was not afraid of him. It was watching him differently. Still, the crisis was far from over, because that afternoon security informed him that a man claiming to be the children's father was at the gate, demanding entry, threatening lawsuits, and media chaos. Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with winter as the man forced his way into the lobby, shouting accusations of kidnapping and exploitation. Lily clung to Adrian's leg, terrified, while Noah stood frozen, pale as a ghost. The father smelled of alcohol and desperation, his eyes calculating rather than loving. He demanded money in exchange for silence, claiming he wanted custody, but his words were inconsistent, filled with threats instead of concern. Adrian saw instantly that this was not a reunion. It was an opportunity for blackmail, and the cameras captured every second, broadcasting the confrontation live across the country. Board members panicked again, warning that legal exposure could destroy everything Adrian had built, but this time he did not hesitate. He ordered a private investigation. Within hours, records surfaced of unpaid debts, gambling losses, and prior complaints of neglect. Authorities were notified, and as police escorted the furious father out of the building, he shouted that Adrian would regret interfering with blood. Adrian stood in the lobby, shaking, not from fear of losing money, but from the realization that these children had faced this kind of instability alone for months. That night, after calming Lily from nightmares and reassuring Noah that no one would take them away, Adrian returned to his office overlooking the city and understood that the crisis was no longer about reputation. It was about responsibility. He could still reverse course, send them into the system, protect his position and stabilize the company, or he could take a path that might permanently change everything, including himself. And as snow began falling again outside the glass windows, Adrian made a silent decision that would shock not only the business world but his own hardened heart. He would not step back this time. The moment he chose them, he unknowingly declared war on his own empire. By the next morning, half the board had aligned against him, calling for a formal vote to remove him as CEO, citing instability and reputational risk. Financial news channels speculated hourly about his downfall. Competitors circled like predators, sensing weakness. But inside the penthouse, something far more important was happening. Lily refused to sleep alone, and Noah barely spoke, carrying the weight of protecting his sister. As if he were the adult, Adrian found himself sitting on the floor beside them late at night, listening to stories about shelters crowded with strangers, about hiding food for later, about pretending not to be scared. He realized these children had survived battles he could not measure in numbers, and for the first time, the idea of losing his position felt smaller than the idea of losing their trust. However, the legal fight intensified. The father hired an aggressive attorney, claiming Adrian manipulated vulnerable minors for image repair. The case threatened to drag on publicly, exposing every corner of his personal life. Shareholders demanded he settle quietly and distance himself from the children, but Adrian refused. He authorized a full investigation, uncovering hospital records, witness statements, and evidence of abandonment that painted a devastating picture of neglect. Meanwhile, anonymous threats began arriving at his office, warning him to back off. Powerful creditors connected to the father did not appreciate interference. One evening, as Adrian returned from a tense legal strategy meeting, he found Noah standing in the dark living room, staring at the city lights. The boy asked quietly if this was all his fault and whether they should just disappear again to make things easier. Those words shook Adrian more than any boardroom challenge, because he recognized himself in that fear, the belief that existence was conditional on usefulness. Adrian sat beside him and admitted something he had never confessed to anyone, that he too had grown up unwanted, moving between relatives after losing his parents. Learning early that success was the only armor that protected him. He told Noah that running had built his empire, but staying might finally build something real. The next day in court, preliminary hearings began. Media crowded, steps expecting drama and scandal, but instead they witnessed something different. Adrian did not arrive with arrogance. He arrived holding Lily's hand and standing firmly beside. Noah testimony revealed patterns of abuse, gambling debts, and repeated abandonment. The father's credibility collapsed under evidence and cross-examination, yet the emotional toll was visible. Lily cried when asked about cold nights, and Noah clenched his fists, fighting tears as he described pretending to be brave. Adrian felt rage but controlled it, knowing the outcome depended on calm strength. After hours of argument, the judge postponed final ruling, requesting additional review, leaving uncertainty hanging heavy. As they exited the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs exploded, and critics still accused him of orchestrating sympathy. But inside the car, as Lily fell asleep against his shoulder, Adrian understood something irreversible had happened. He no longer saw them as children he rescued. He saw them as his responsibility, his choice, his family, whether the court approved or not. And as the city lights blurred past the window, he realized that even if he lost the company, even if the board removed him, even if the world misunderstood him, he would not abandon them, because the real transformation was no longer about saving two children from the cold. It was about refusing to let fear make him cold again. The verdict day arrived like a storm that could either destroy him or redefine him. The courtroom was silent, heavy with expectation, as media crews waited outside, predicting either a corporate collapse or a public redemption. Adrian stood tall, but inside he felt something far more fragile than fear. He felt hope. Noah sat beside him, jaw tight, trying to appear strong, while Lily held his hand, whispering that she did not want to go back to being invisible. When the judge entered, the air shifted. Testimony had been reviewed, investigations completed, and the truth laid bare. Records confirmed abandonment, unpaid debts, reckless gambling, and credible reports of neglect. The father sat across the room, no longer shouting, no longer confident, just shrinking under the weight of evidence. When the judge began to speak, every heartbeat felt amplified. Custody rights were permanently terminated. The courtroom gasped softly, and Lily burst into tears, not of fear but relief. Yet the decision did not end there, because the judge then turned toward Adrian, questioning his intentions, his lifestyle, his capacity to provide emotional stability, not just financial security. Critics had painted him as a temporary hero chasing image repair, and the court demanded clarity. Adrian spoke without corporate polish. He admitted his flaws, his past emotional distance, his obsession with control, but he also confessed that meeting these children had forced him to confront the emptiness behind his success. He said he could provide homes, schools, protection, but more importantly, he could provide presence, something he himself had lacked growing up. The judge studied him carefully before granting temporary guardianship pending final adoption review, and with that single statement, the world outside shifted. Headlines changed tone. Employees celebrated, and even skeptical analysts admitted that the narrative had transformed from scandal to significance. However, victory carried cost, because during the legal battle, the board had completed its vote, and Adrian received the message moments after leaving the courtroom. He had been officially removed as CEO, effective immediately. The empire he built no longer belonged to him. Reporters chased him for reaction, expecting outrage, but instead he looked down at Lily, gripping his hand, and Noah walking beside him. And he smiled softly, telling the cameras that some losses are actually gifts. That night, back at the penthouse, now uncertain if it would remain his for long, Adrian gathered the children and told them the truth about stepping down. Noah looked worried, asking if it was because of them, and Adrian answered honestly, yes and no, explaining that sometimes doing the right thing demands sacrifice, and that no title was worth more than a promise he had made in the snow. Later, alone on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker, he felt the strange calm of a man who had finally chosen purpose over power, unaware that, within days, an unexpected call from major shareholders would challenge everything once more and offer him a future he never imagined. Losing his empire was supposed to break him, but instead it revealed who truly stood behind him. Within days of his removal, major shareholders began publicly questioning the board's decision, pointing to rising public support, employee loyalty, and a global wave of admiration that had strengthened the company brand beyond expectation. Petitions flooded, and clients threatened to withdraw if compassion was punished, and what began as scandal transformed into a movement. Investors realized that Adrian had not damaged the company, he had humanized it, and under immense pressure, the board reversed course, offering him reinstatement. With expanded authority and control, the media called it the most dramatic corporate comeback of the decade. But when Adrian received the call, he was not in a boardroom. He was sitting on the living room floor helping Lily with her reading while Noah practiced a school presentation, and for the first time in his life, the decision did not feel obvious. He looked at the children, who once trembled on a frozen bench, and understood that power had never truly satisfied him. Presence, did he accept it? The position, but on one condition: the company would permanently fund a nationwide foundation, converting empty properties into shelters, education centers, and long-term housing for displaced families. The proposal shocked executives, yet the momentum of public support forced agreement, and over the next year, abandoned buildings transformed into safe havens. Thousands of children found warmth, opportunity, and stability, and the narrative of ruthless CEO disappeared, replaced by something far stronger. Visionary leader with heart. Months later, the final adoption hearing arrived. The courtroom quieter. This time, less spectacle, more certainty. When the judge declared the adoption official, Lily ran into Adrian's arms, laughing, while Noah tried to stay composed but failed as tears streamed down his face. And in that embrace, Adrian realized the true shock of the story was never about headlines, lawsuits, or boardroom battles. It was about a man who believed he had everything discovering he had nothing. That mattered until two small voices asked for warmth. Years past the foundation expanded globally, and Adrian led his company with a balance of strength and empathy that competitors struggled to replicate. But the most powerful moment came on. Another winter night during a charity event in the same park. Where everything began, snow falling gently as cameras recorded the transformation of the once broken bench into a memorial symbolizing hope. Lily, now confident and radiant, stepped up to the microphone and said we were freezing that night and we thought the world had forgotten us. But he stopped, and because he stopped, thousands of children are warm. Tonight the crowd stood in silence, then applause thundered across the park. Adrian looked at the sky, remembering the man he used to be, cold, calculated, untouchable, and realized that the empire he was most proud of was not built of glass towers or profits, but of love, resilience, and a family formed in the most unexpected way. And as the snow continued to fall softly around them, he understood that sometimes the greatest power is simply choosing not to walk away.